For this video, we're going to start making a game where the computer is going to generate a random number between whatever parameters you give it. So if you see here, we have to tell it a lower range for the random number. We're going to do 1. And enter the higher range, we're going to go to 10. So that we need to guess a number between 1 and 10. So you start guessing your numbers, and then it'll tell you if your guess is higher or lower than the number you're looking for, and then you try to guess again. So here we need to try guessing something lower than 5. So we'll try 3. That is still higher. Try again. Still higher. So it must be 1. So we guessed our magic number in 4 guesses, and then we can decide if we would like to play again. Add new parameters. We can go up to 1 to 100 and do it that way. And then when we decide that we want to be done, we press 0 and the game ends, giving us game over. So we're going to get started with building this game from scratch. So we're going to create our project, call it Guess the Number. And once again, we're started off with the default template for a Java program. I like to spread it out a little bit, at least to start, just so I can kind of see where things are going to be a little better. So the first thing we're going to want to do is have the program generate a random number for us. So we're going to create a variable in here. It's going to be an integer, and we're going to call it the magic number. Remember, start a variable name with a lowercase letter. Any other words inside of it you capitalize. And we're going to initialize it to be 0 to start. So to generate a random number, we're going to have an import up here. We're going to import java.util.random. Pretty straightforward. So for our random, we're going to need to then come into our main method, and we're going to type random, give our random a name, we're just going to call it num, equals new random. So that gets us the ability to find a random number. So now if we come down to our magic number, we're going to be able to assign it something else. We're going to assign it to num.nextInt. So now to see what happens here, we're going to do a print statement. Magic number. So we're going to print that out. Let's run it and see what happens. We get a random number of a very small negative number right here. But we want to be able to put some parameters on that. So what you do is, on this line, you put your higher limit in here. So let's say we want to do 1 to 10. We put a 10 in there. And now it'll generate a random number much smaller, 2, between, this is actually generating a number between 0 and 9. So if we wanted to do 1 to 10, we have to add 1. So we do 1 plus num.nextInt 10. So that will generate a real number between 1 and 10. No zeros. So we're going to start it off with wanting to be able to add our own parameters for if we want to do 1 to 10, 1 to 20, 1 to 100, 1 to a million, whatever you wanted to do. So remember, if we're going to be dealing with user input, we're going to need another import up here. java.util.scanner. And then in the main class, outside of the main method, remember we're going to need to make it static scanner. We're going to call it user input equals new scanner, and in the parentheses system.in. Don't forget your semicolon. So now we got our scanner set up and ready to go. So what we can do, we're going to move all this down. Actually, the random declaration can stay at the top. Oh. The random declaration can stay at the top. Underneath there, we're going to do a print statement saying enter the lower limit. So we're going to need to assign our lower limit to a variable. It's going to be an integer variable, and we're going to just call it lower. We're going to initialize it to be 0 to prevent any issues in the future. So now we can come under our enter the lower limit print statement, and we can assign lower to the scanner user input dot next int. So now our lower limit will be assigned to whatever we give it to. We're going to need to do that again for the upper limit. Upper equals user input dot next int. So now we have the ability for our upper and lower. Remember, we're going to need to initialize it up here. We can do that in one line, putting all our integers on one line. We can call it upper equals 0, and there we go. So now we want the upper and lower limit to be automatically put into our random number generator right here. So here we have our manually entered lower limit of 1 and our upper limit of 10. If we substitute these for our variables, we should be able to have a random number generated between our lower and upper limits that we decided. So to test it out, we're going to add a couple more print statements. We're going to check out the lower. Print out the upper, and make sure our random number, our magic number, is in between those two. So let's run it and see what happens. Enter the lower limit. We're going to make it 1. The upper limit, 10. Tells us our lower and upper and picks a number in between there. If we run it again, we're going to try bigger numbers just to make sure. 1 to 1,000. And now it picks a number somewhere in there, 501. So it looks like it's working pretty good, so we'll be able to move on to our next step. Now that we're generating our random number in between the parameters that we want to start putting in the guessing part of the game. So first thing, we need a prompt to tell us to guess a number. And we want to know, since we can have custom parameters, we want to be able to tell the user what the parameters are. So guess a number between lower and upper. When we do that, we're going to want to read our input. We're going to slide this over just to make it a little bit easier. We don't need to be able to see over here, just spread everything out a little bit more. So now we're going to call this our guess. And we're going to be guessing an integer, so it can be user input dot next int. We're going to need to initialize guess up top, so we're going to put it in here. Start it off with 0. We'll get our new value, and to test this out, we're going to add a print statement that prints out our guess, and we're going to run it to make sure it works. Our lower limit, 1, we're going to say 50. We get our random number, guess a number between 1 and 50. We can do that, and it stores it correctly. So now that we're able to guess a number, we want the program to tell us if we got it right, if we're higher, or if we're lower than the magic number. So what we're going to do now is use some if statements. We're going to say if our guess is equal to the magic number, be sure when you're assigning a variable a value, use one equal sign. When you're checking to see if two values are equal to each other, you use a double equal sign. So if our guess is equal to our magic number, we're going to want to output something saying that we guessed the number correctly. We guessed the magic number. But what if we didn't guess the magic number on the first try? Well, then else we want to see if our guess is less than the magic number. So if it's less than, we want another output telling us your guess is less than. And there's one more condition. So we could say if it's not equal to and it's not less than the magic number, then it will definitely be greater than. But we want to be specifically checking for that, and I'll explain why in a minute. So if our guess is greater than the magic number, then we want another output. Your guess is more than the magic number. And the reason we didn't just keep a normal else is we're going to have one more down here. That way we can account for any unexpected errors. So we're just going to come in here and put error so that we can see if something's going on in our code that it doesn't go into any of these blocks, which it should. A number should be equal to, less than, or greater than. There's nowhere else it can go. But if it is, we want to say error. That way we know to look that there's an issue in here somewhere. So now let's come in. We're going to run the code. And our lower limit of 1, we're going to just do 10 for this one. Guess a number between 1 and 10. Now, since we're testing, we can see that our magic number is 5. So if we want, we can guess that right off the bat, and we can see that you guessed the magic number. We'd have to rerun the code again to try again. One and 10 for our limits. We're going to guess a number lower than the magic number this time. Your guess is less than the magic number, so that works, right? We're going to do it one more time and try one greater than the magic number. 1 to 10. The magic number is 7, so we want to guess bigger to test that. It is 9. Your guess is more than the magic number. So we know that it works based on our guess. If it's equal to, less than, or greater than, it'll tell us where we're at. So now, as you can see, when we guess a number that isn't the magic number, the program ends and we're just done. So we want to be able to continue guessing until we get the guess correct. So what we need to do is we need to take this code right here that is telling us to guess a number between the upper and lower limit, taking our input and then testing it to see if it's equal to, less than, or greater than the magic number. We need to do that on repeat, so we need to put it in a loop, much like in the Scratch tutorials where we use the forever block to continuously scan to see if these conditions are true until something stops it. So for this, we're going to use a do while loop. So a do while loop will bring us into the code, into that block of code, and it will go through at least once. And then after it goes through once, it will use the while condition, and if it's true, it'll keep going through until that condition is not true and the program ends. So we're gonna make some space here, and we're gonna put a do. Underneath that do is where the while goes. So we have while our guess is not equal to our magic number, we will be performing whatever we have inside of this block right here in the do. What do we want to do until we get our number? Well, we want to guess the number. We want the program to tell us to guess the number between our lower and upper limits, and we want to see if it is equal to, less than, or greater than the other one. So we're going to take all of this code and we're going to move it inside of the do while loop. So now what this is going to do is it's going to get its random number, then we're going to come into our loop and it's going to say guess a number. We're going to guess it. It's going to check to see if any of these are true. So if we guess the magic number on the first try, we're going to get our you guessed the magic number. It'll come down to the end of our do while and see that in fact guess is equal to the magic number. So this is not true and it will end. But if the guess is less than or greater than, then it's not equal to, and it will start the do while loop over again, having us guess a new number. So let's run it and see how it goes. And we have an error. So let's check it out. We can see right here in the main an error where expected a semicolon. That means we missed a semicolon somewhere. So now we got to come back through the code and find where we missed it. And it's right here on the while. In a do while loop, you have to have a semicolon after your while. So let's run it again and that should fix it. So here we go. Enter a lower limit, 1 to 10. Guess the number between 1 and 10. Since we know it's 7, we want to test this a little bit. We're going to go with 2. Your guess is less than the magic number, and sure enough, it tells us to guess a number between 1 and 10 again. So if we keep going, it'll keep going until we find our random number. We guess the magic number, and then program ends. So that's going to be it for this video. We've got a base game working to where you can guess your random number. To actually turn it into a game, all we need to do is come up here, and we're going to actually just get rid of all 3 of these. We use them to test to see if our code was working right, but for the actual game, we don't need any of them telling us what the upper and lower limits are, and we don't want to know what the magic number is. We also don't need to see our guess. This code right here, when we type our guess, notice how it's printing twice. We type it, it's there, and then it reprints it. We used it for testing. We can now get rid of it. When we run it, our lower limit 1 to 10, and now we don't know what it is, and we actually have to play the game and guess our random number. It's less than the magic number, so we're going to go up. Still less, try again, still less, which means it must be 10, and there we go, you guessed the magic number, it was 10. So in the next video, we're going to take this a step further, and we're going to make it so that you can decide if you want to play again, and it will just continue the game, and it's going to keep track of how many guesses it takes you to get to the correct answer.